Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this lesson, we're going to look at the states of the father. And if you've been listening to the previous lessons, you'll know that the father actually falls into two categories. He's part of the Zawil Furud, and he's also part of the Asabat, those who receive residue. And these relatives are the ones who receive a fixed portion. So the father is in quite a unique position, along with the grandfather and a few other relatives. He falls into two different categories. Let's consider the states of the father, and we can see how he will fall into both in any given situation. There's actually three states of the father. We draw out a table again. We can say there's 1, 2, 3 states, and the condition. We'll put the share, and then the condition. So the first share that father receives is a sixth, and he receives this when there is a son or son's son. So he gets a sixth when there's a son or son's son or son. If we keep going on down the line, he gets a sixth. The second state is when he gets a sixth plus asaba, and we just put an ayn for asaba for short, and this is when there is a daughter or son's daughter. And it can also refer to son's daughter. So essentially it's either daughter or son's daughter. If there are either of these two alive at the time the deceased passed away, then the father receives a sixth and asaba, so he receives a fixed share and he receives the residue after everyone else has received their fixed shares. The third state is when the father just receives asaba, and this is when there are no children. Or son's children, meaning son's son or son's daughter. If there's neither children or son's children, then the father receives asaba. So he doesn't receive a sixth, he just receives whatever remains after the other Zawil Furud will receive their share. So if we draw this out again, keep that in picture. So we have X, he has a father and he has a son. In this situation, we can see that the father will receive a sixth share. State number 2 is when we have X, he has a father, and rather than a son, he just has a daughter. In this situation, the father gets a sixth and he gets an asaba, the remainder or the residue. The third category, or the third situation, is when we have X and he has a father and he doesn't have any children or grandchildren through the son. So son's son or son's daughter doesn't exist, so no children. and in this situation we can see from above we receive asaba. What happens, the question arises, what happens if we have X, he has a father, he has a son and a daughter. Does he fall into category number 1, or does he fall into category number 1, or does he fall into category 2? Well, we actually take the sixth share, so we take the state as per when it's just a son. So the father in this situation would just receive a sixth, and that's the state of the father. And as we go along, we'll do some examples. It's actually worth doing an example now. We've covered the father, and we've covered the husband and wife, so we can actually do a simple calculation, a simple inheritance calculation. So as we've previously seen, the when we do a calculation, it's set out as follows. Draw a line which represents the deceased X, and we then put in the surviving relatives. So in this situation, what we're going to do is we're going to have father, and we're going to have a wife. And these, in this situation, these are the only two relatives who are left. And we know from previously that the wife's share is either an eighth or a quarter, and it's a quarter in this situation because there are no children. And we know from what we've just covered that if there are no children, then the father receives the remainder, or the asaba. So father gets asaba, and so we've given the wife a quarter. Asaba is essentially 3/4, and that's actually the Meerath completed. Father gets 3/4, wife gets a quarter, and that's how the inheritance is distributed. X's inheritance is distributed. So this is the first real example we've done, and as we move along, we'll do some more involved calculations, inshallah.